What's going on, everybody? This is Rick calling from Tobacco Grove, and we've got with us some very special guests, of course, for our Cigars from Afar. We have got the one and only Todd from Tatuaje. We've got Cole, and we have Dan Welsh from L'Atelier, Surrogates, and Tatuaje. Dan, what's going on,
hey guys?
What's up, Dan?
Well, we have much better weather than you, I hear.
It got a little cold here.
Yeah.
About 35 and snow.
I'm over at my office, but honestly, I should be at home sitting outside right now.
Oh, my
God. What you got for temp?
I see you guys did that earlier, though. The other ones this week, you were outside.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It was beautiful.
I didn't see that cold spell is coming our way.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, our lowest that's coming is on Sunday. It's 57 and rain. So
beautiful day.
Good for you, Dan. I'm happy for you.
Yeah, good for you.
Dan, you're not even in California right now. You're in what, Ohio right now?
Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah, buddy. All right.
Jeez.
Back to the motherland.
Yeah.
Love
You're not going to OH him, Rick?
No, we already did
that.
We already did that before the call, so no.
Well, fine. It'll be that way.
I feel bad. I'm the only one smoking, and I'm smoking a 60 ring gauge, which I almost never do. But
I was gonna say you got the Grand Kahonu.
Grand Kahonu. Tell us about the Grand Kahonu, Dan.
So this is the Series A, the Arnold. Yeah, I think you have those at the shop. I think.
Yep.
60 by 5.
No, yeah, it's a 5 by 60 version of the regular Grand Kahonu, which is usually 6.5 by 60. So made in Miami. The Grand Kahonu itself has been around since, I want to say, 04.
Yep.
If Pete was here, he'd correct me. It might be 05. But anyways, it's one of the old staunch ball busters from the Brown Label lineup. If anybody doesn't know, Brown Label Tatuaje is the core of that started it all in 2003. So that's the base blend. We have a few sticks like this that are dubbed Kahonu, which is a vulgar term in Cuban that basically means big balls. But it adds Ligero to the blend, so there's more Ligero. Otherwise, it's literally Brown Label with added Ligero.
Dan, talk to us a little bit about obviously we all know a lot about Tatuaje, which is kind of where everything started. So go back in time a little bit. I remember once you told me a story about how you and Pete first met and how this ball your friendship, et cetera, that started evolving. You want to share any of that with us?
Sure. I mean, way back in '99, I was traveling back and forth to LA, taking acting classes, and one thing led to another, and I decided that, hey, look who we got now.
What?
Oh, Casey, the Sunshine Band.
I shared the link.
What's up, man?
You didn't tell me we were having a special guest.
I was trying to surprise you.
That's a surprise.
That is a surprise.
You got the wrong Johnson, huh?
You're not Pete.
Hey, Casey, Todd has snow. The other guys, is it snowing yet, Rick?
No, it's not. I don't have any snow. We had a little bit of frost this morning, but we haven't had snow.
Yeah, I have the same thing.
But it's colder. But it's colder than it has been.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like right now, I'm closest one to the cities, and I'm like, it's like right now, I think it's like 40 degrees on my porch, and it's probably really like 36.
Oh, that's warm.
60.
Casey, what are you looking at right now? What do you have for weather?
45 and raining for the past 2 days.
Wow.
Yeah, it was all coming off the coast, so we usually get what you guys get, but
yeah,
right.
He had snow earlier, so
yeah, we've had 2 dumps of snow with 10 inches or more in the past 2 weeks. So this whole thing.
Wow.
So wait a minute.
Then I'm not going to complain.
4 of us aren't smoking. Thanks, Dan.
I
tried
to smoke. I couldn't even make it to the patio. I was slipping and sliding on the deck.
I'm glad I'm at least inside because I was almost at home on my back patio. It's so nice out.
So Rick will kill me if I show him the cigar I'm holding right now.
So Casey,
original Boris.
Yeah.
Nice.
So Casey, we were talking, Dan was kind of starting into how Tatuaje kind of came about, how he and Pete, their friendship, where that kind of started off. That's kind of where we left off. Until you did the bomb. You dropped the bomb and guest surprised us. So
Yeah.
Yeah, we can back up further. Casey can talk about when Pete left Maine.
how much time do we have? Right.
So Pete and Casey grew up together. Then he left Maine for L.A. And then there's this dark period that unless Pete was here, we don't know, neither of us know about, right, Casey?
Well, a little bit. The band era I knew about, and the transition between my parents going out to LA and finally seeing what Pete was doing, like a derelict. And then his transition into cigar world, which was kind of cool because you remember when it was Newman and Fuente and that East-West piece going on?
Absolutely.
I got to meet Cigar Pete in that transition because he was coming and trading Fuente for Newman with Dave Garofalo and any retailer he could find.
Oh my gosh!
Oh wow!
We just found a way to, but Dave Garofalo is kind of like the Kevin Bacon of the cigar industry. Everybody's somehow or another. There's 7 ways of connecting with Dave Garofalo. So
yeah.
Oh, look at you digging deep.
My rep met Edgar that way. I mean, my rep met Dave that way through their group. Back when they had the Big Smoke at Copley Plaza in Boston, and I think I only went to 2 of them with my brother, and I got to meet George Brightman before I knew who the hell George Brightman was. I got to meet Carlito and Carlos. Anybody, actually, I want to say Marvin Shankin was in the house that night, and I remember shaking his hand, not knowing who the fuck he was.
Mm-hmm.
And now, full circle, me in
Right.
the industry, I get to meet all these guys. It's pretty cool.
it's awesome.
That's back in that should be back in Grand Havana days, right, Casey?
Probably transitioning into Grand Havana days.
Okay.
Before.
Oh wow!
I think he
And
was
then-
running some stuff for Gus's too.
All right. So then in late '99, when I was traveling back and forth, I met Pete because he was managing the Grand Havana retail store. So I was inquiring about what this mystical club was all about because according to the magazines, there was a 3-year waiting list. And I figured if I actually moved out there, I should get on a waiting list, right?
Right.
Yeah. A couple months later, I was in the club, but.
Couple months, same thing.
And then Pete and I got into wine together out there, and he taught me a shit ton about cigars. He knew the whole Cuban island by then, all the brands and whatnot. And I had never had a Cuban until then, which didn't come from Pete. The first one came from someone else at the club that was getting tired of smelling my Padron Anniversarios that I had in my locker and was smoking every time I went in. But I traveled out on weekends. That was it. And I did that. And then when 9/11 hit and it got so much weirder to travel back and forth, I had a couple opportunities to move out there and never did. And so I ended up moving back to Columbus, giving up the apartment out there and just staying here. And then that was 2002. And then in 2003, Pete started Tatuaje.
Yeah. There was a transition period too. I was working for Adidas at the time, and I went out to see my brother, and it was during the Huntington earthquake. Remember that, Dan? There's probably 3 years going up to LA. That was
8?
94-ish.
Oh, that early. Okay.
That early. And I got to actually, the earthquake happened, big shutdown in LA. He was living in North Hollywood at the time, which is near Huntington, I guess. I'm not so sure about LA and the map, but we actually went down to Tijuana, he and I, to run some Cubans back. So this was not Gus's smoke shop. This was the Big Easy.
The
So
Big
Casey,
Easy.
what were the Cuban cigars that you guys were really in?
Oh, they weren't. No.
It's just novelty.
Yeah. No, actually, I mean, the house he was living in, he had tubs and tubs and tubs of Cuban stuff that he had been hoarding, kind of like toilet paper now, right?
Right.
He was kind of
Just like that.
a bunch of it for the guys that he knew at the Big Easy, and then I think he was just about ready to transition into the Grand Havana room then.
That's awesome.
So Tatuaje starts up in 03 then. Casey, when do you get involved in everything then?
The precursor was actually, it started with a Facebook message to my brother. He was going down to Nicaragua, and I think Dan was on this trip, originally planning to be on this trip, correct, Dan?
Yeah, I was. Yep, I was on.
And I just threw it out there. I said, have passport, we'll travel. And he goes, really? He goes, if you want to go, I got a ticket for you. So that's when I got to meet Dan. And that was the first step into the industry, or finding out what it was really like. And then within a year, Casper comes into play. Dan, Casper, Pete, and I were kind of just toying around, talking about this thing and how it will all work out. And then boom, Atelier comes around right after that. Correct, Dan? Am I?
Yep. And a few years before that, I had been down to the factory. Multiple times before that, about 3 times, I think. Or that was either my 3rd or 4th trip down. But I got to a point being back here by 07. I was doing computer consulting work, database, mainframe, IBM database, DB2. That was my expertise, and I was just so sick of the cubicle world that, and I was smoking so many cigars at the time that I approached Pete, flew out to LA and talked to him about starting a website, because back then no one had what we see everybody has now, a cool website that actually has photos of the cigars, and they try to ship them properly rather than, just a big warehouse type feel. And then even the big warehouse guys that did have his product, because by then it had grown for 4 years in. So the rest of the Miami product in mid-birth, Red Label, which was the first one produced in Nicaragua. Vericu had a East-West release right about that same time.
We remember the
Cab One already existed out of Miami.
Yep.
And so the brands were growing, and I was seeing information basically copied from one place to the other, and none of it was right, from what I knew about the products. And so I approached him and said, look, I want to start a website really just to, keep my hobby going, provide funds for my hobby. It'll be small. And, but what I want to do is make sure that I have all of your products out there with all of the right language and images and whatnot. So be a brick and mortar online. And he's like, oh yeah, that's awesome. So that happened, and it turned from hobby into, okay, I can't do both things anymore. And, and it swelled up for about a year or two. And then as it started, dying off, other people were doing the same thing by then. It's now 2010, 2011. A lot of people had a website out the back door of their brick and mortar. So, they increased their sales that way. And, but, I was still doing and still do that. It's very tiny now, but as it started going, less and less, I was freaking out a bit. And Pete, that's when that trip that Casey was talking about, it was just after that Pete was like, well, hold on, because I've got an idea. And it was, that next year, the 4 of us went down together to Nicaragua, and that's when we kind of talked about putting Atelier Imports together. And Atelier Imports was a sister company for first, what Casey, 5 years, 4? Yeah, 4. And then we just, kind of merged them together, because for you guys ordering for your shop, it was getting weird that you would like, hey, I got this big Tatuaje order and I've got a smaller Atelier order, but I have to order them separately. Didn't make any sense.
Right.
We were shipping them both out of, LA. We just kind of had to merge books together to make that happen, so that it's always been one big family of products.
Sure.
But Atelier was started as, a sisterhood to it, in a way that we joke all the time that Pete had this solo career creating all these brands, and it literally was, a one-man show. And then he got the 3 of us involved with him. So there was a foursome that was, raising our hands to vote on blends and, ideas. And so we birthed new ideas. And I guess the beginnings of Atelier were, what's missing in your portfolio? Well, nothing was really missing, but what would accent your portfolio? Like, I want to say lighter, more finesse blends, but Cab I One's been around since '04. So, and that is as Cubanesque as a finesse blend as, you can, as we have. And then, but that was kind of where we were heading. And then I had started Surrogates with Pete through New Havana, and it birthed there, and we always wanted to turn that, national, try to do it as a brand. And so we put that under that umbrella as well, with the intention of, expanding it further and further.
So Dan and Casey, I got a question for you too. So kind of explain kind of the relationship you guys have with the Garcias from My Father Cigars. I don't know if a lot of people kind of put those two dots together for both Tatuaje and L'Atelier and Surrogates.
Well, on the L'Atelier side, it's kind of a special relationship because of the lead factor. Sancti Spiritus is something that Pepin had been growing through Oliva, right, Dan? In Ecuador. And they got this special leaf, Sancti Spiritus, and Pepin had, at that point in time, no use for it. Pete was transitioning a lot. I think at that time it was a lot of broadleaf still. And that was his thing. And it just so happened that the 4 of us a year earlier kind of got involved through Pete. Casper with his friendship with Pete. My relationship with Dan now, because we met in Nicaragua, and my brother and Dan's relationship, and it just popped in. We had talked about bundle brands, right, in Atelier. Surrogates was this thing with Dan and Pete. And then we have this wrapper leaf, Sancti Spiritus, and what were we going to use it for? So the collab starts. So that's the special relationship. I mean, nobody else is using this except for Pete. I think he used it in the Jackal. And that was it. There was nothing else. So we kind of ran with it. And it actually it was kind of cool because we were able to find our, no pun intended, our identity along the way through Maduro by using Sancti Spiritus in every blend that we do some way or another. So that was the kind of the tie-in with the Garcias for us. With Pete, you have to go back as far as Pepin, meeting Pepin, which is really awesome. And that relationship's just always been almost father-son like.
Sure. Because I remember like when they first started in Tatuaje, if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, it was especially the brown label, I guess as it's known now, was like Nicaraguan Puro, I believe, when it first came out. And then it switched to an Ecuadorian wrapper, maybe in 07, 08. I don't know if that's true or not, or if anything was. I always wanted to ask that question. I never got a chance to ask you guys.
I can't speak to where the original was using Corojo as a wrapper.
I thought it was.
I can't speak to whether that was Nicaraguan Corojo or not, because Pepin was buying tobacco at the time.
Sure.
And that's to expand on your question as well about the relationship and what the Garcias mean to our company and Pete. Like Casey said, it goes back to them finding each other in '03, and
Sure.
Pete approached Pepin after being recommended, by someone, Pepin being recommended by someone to do that, and so they came up with the Tatuaje, the first brown label blend, and it's gone on since. But what has changed is, back then the Garcias were rolling on Calle Ocho, 8th Street in Miami,
Yep.
very small quantities, obviously buying leaf. I'm not sure how much, if any, processing type thing they were doing at the time, maybe fermenting, small piles of it, in Miami, whatnot. But they were pretty much buying ready to roll tobacco from sources.
Sure.
Now, as far back as then, I would argue what made Pepin cigars what they were was his ability to go find and buy tobacco that he was in love with to use.
Right.
What has changed now is that in every one of our cigars, in every one of their cigars, every component sans the wrapper, and soon to be many more wrappers will be grown by them. Every other component, filler and the 2 binder leaves that we use, everything is grown and processed by the Garcias. So talk about, being able to have something that's way more consistent, way more available. As far as unavailability goes, we don't grow Connecticut broadleaf because we don't have a farm in Connecticut. So we had to buy Connecticut broadleaf.
Sure.
The Garcias would process it in Nicaragua, but as sources dried up and there became a broadleaf shortage there for a hiccup for a year or so, and some of those farmers stopped growing it to grow cannabis, basically, or hemp, sorry, for CBD. Those sources dried up, and so we were short on broadleaf. A lot of manufacturers were. But everything else, we have plenty of. And the Garcias just keep putting their money back into buying more and more farms. So we're growing more and more tobacco. 2 years.
2 years ago.
2 years, Casey, right? Yeah.
Yep.
2 years ago, we were down and they grew their first crop of shade-grown wrapper. And
Really?
what a sight. But then last year, because of the turmoil, no one went down. Well, guest-wise, right? Pete had been down with the family a few times, but we didn't get to go. And then we went in February, and they had planted it on yet another farm, and they had expanded that crop to just a sea of shade-grown wrapper. It's crazy. Todd saw it when he was down there.
Yeah, we touched a little bit on that when I would talk to these guys a couple days ago with my father. But yeah, I mean, just because I went down 3 years ago as a retailer, and then I went down this year, and the growth is something I would have never even dreamed of.
Right.
It's crazy what they're doing down there now, and the facilities that they have and the farms that they have.
Is there a project they're going to use with that leaf? I would imagine so.
We already do. Our Hebrew.
Sure.
That's not shade grown though, but yes, we have 2 brandings. Actually, Tatuaje Black Label is sun-grown Criollo wrapper that's grown by the Garcias. So 100% Nicaraguan, 100% Garcia puros. So Black Label is that, Hebrew, and New Avitas. So New Avitas is the 1 size and Hebrew in 2 sizes. That's a sun-grown Corojo wrapper that the Garcias grew. And so the same thing, Nicaraguan and Garcia Puro. And then the shade-grown wrapper is just now coming available. Right. And I know, Rick, you guys will have access probably to an upcoming project that Pete will hopefully, if this doesn't delay us too long, will be coming out of Miami, dubbed ERH, and that is using sun-grown. I'm sorry, shade-grown Corojo wrapper from that crop 2 years ago around Brown Label. So basically, and again, people will say, well, that's the original Brown Label, right? It's got Corojo. Well, yes, formula or recipe-wise, but I mean, compare that tobacco with that tobacco from 2003 that was bought from who knows where by a man who knows how to buy the best tobacco, granted, right? But, you know, not the same as him growing and processing that tobacco. So that's the big thing. And then, yes, I think you'll probably see My Father projects. Todd, is the new Fonseca using that shade grown?
I'm not sure. We did the taste test where we got the 3 potential blends when we were down there and smoked all 3 blends and got our vote in it and everything, which was awesome. But I can't remember if that was the wrapper on that one.
Yeah, okay. It's probably a secreto.
Yeah.
yeah. I don't think they're gonna. Yeah, it's kind of cool though. I love the fact that, you know, if you go back to Pete's film and Carlito talking about never being that manufacturer, you know, until he grew his own capa.
Sure.
This is really the coolest transition. I know they have used like sun-grown criollo,
sure,
black label, but this is a whole new world for them. It's pretty awesome.